Hello, how you doing? It's Mrdothemath here, and today we're going to talk about simple interest, right? Simple interest, because when you talk about interest, interest is where the money resides, for banks, right? So whenever a bank loans you money, the interest is how they make money off of the loan that they gave you. The same thing applies to whenever you make a deposit, whenever you lend somebody money or whenever you invest money, the what you get paid back for your investment or for you lending is interest, right? That's where you get your money back, right? So let's talk about it. So like I said, when you make an investment or make a deposit or you loan anything, that initial payment, that initial money or whatever is called the principal. So it's principal, right? Principal, PAL is a person. PLE is the amount that you deposit into a financial institution or the amount that you take back for a loan, right? It's always represented by P, right? The rate at which this amount acquires or gains value is known as R, right? And that is the rate that it grows is his interest, right? And the other thing you want to consider is the amount of time. And traditionally, it is represented by T. And time is always relative to a year, right? Now, today we're going to look at examples where the time is going to be less than a year. It's going to be months, and it's going to we're going to look at days examples as well, okay? But these are the basic values or the basic letters or symbols that you use in calculating the simple interest, right? Now that you have these, what you need is your equation or your formula. So the formula for a simple interest is I equals PRT, right? I meaning interest equals principal times the rate times time, right? So without further ado, let's do some math, all right? So here's our first example. Our first example, we're going to determine the interest rate when $2,000 is deposited into an account that at a 6% interest rate for 1 year, right? We want to figure out how much money this deposit is going to make after a year, all right? So you'll use this formula, I equals PRT. The deposit is P, right? The rate is R times T, right? Now, when you're calculating the interest rate or when you're dealing with these kind of formulas, the interest rate has to be signified in decimal form, which means that you have to move forward by 2 decimal places, right? So 6% is 0.06%, right? Now let's do the math. So it's going to be 2,000 times 0.06 times 1. That's going to give us our interest, right? You do the math by plugging it into the calculator, and you're going to end up with $120, right? So when you deposited $2,000 into a banking institution that at a 6% interest rate for a year, you're to $120, okay? Let's look at another example. What if you take out a loan for a car? We'll move over. We can erase over. Let's see. I think this is no, we're gonna put it over here. All right, same thing. Right. Take out a loan for a car. All right, again, principal, rate, time. PRT, right? I equals, we're gonna put it over here so you know. All right, so look, we're taking out a loan for a car for $1,800. All right, so $1,800 loan for a car, 8% rate, 2 years. All right, so now we're calculating simple interest for more than a year, right? But we use the same formula. The loan amount is P, so that's P. The next thing you want to do is figure out what the rate is, 8%, 0.08, right? That's the rate. And the time is 2 years, right? Once you identify what's what, plug it into the equation and do the math. Let's do it. So we got I is going to equal 1,800 P times the rate, R times the time, 2. Okay? 1,800 times 0.08 times 2. You put it all in at one time, and when you do the math, the answer should be $288, right? $288. Now, there are situations where you'll take out money for a day amount of time, right? And so then when there's days involved, what you want to do is you want to use the banker's rule, right? So back in the early times when calculators weren't calculators, they created this formula to figure out how to calculate interest without a calculator. And so the banker's rule was basically the number of days that you took your loan out for or whatever over 360. See, we know that there's 365 days in a year, but for the banker's rule, they canceled out those 5 days and just simplified it to 360 days, right? So let's look at an example that requires us to use the banker's rule. And this is what you'll always use when you are doing work when you're calculating the simple interest over days, right? So in this particular situation, there was a $12,000 loan taken out, right? At a 9% interest rate over 80 days. Okay? This is the principal, $12,000. 9% is the rate, R, and 80 days is our length of time for that loan. Okay? So, first things first, let's just put it into the formula. The formula being I equals P, 12,000, times R, 0.09, times T, 80 over 360. Right? This is your time. Now, one thing you need to keep in mind, based on what you're seeing right here, is a reminder. What you want to keep in mind is time is always relative to a year. So when you think about 80 days, we think about 365 days in a year. However, we're using the banker's rule. Banker's rule to calculate or to reference our year, our time. Okay? Now, again, to do the math, let's plug it into your calculator. 12,000 times 0.09 times 0.222 repeated, that's what 80 over 360 is, will give you a total of $240, right? And so that's how much interest is going to acquire over this 80 days, okay? It's quite a bit. That's quite a bit of interest, right? Again, interest is how banking institutions, financial institutions make money off of people, right? They never just give you money. They give you money at a rate per month or per year, right? And because of that rate, they make money off of giving you money. And they want their money back, which goes into our next step, which is calculating the future value of a loan or a deposit or an investment, right? So whereas we were initially calculating how much the interest would be, remember that when you pay things back or when things are paid to you, you have both the interest to consider and the actual principal amount. And so the future amount of the future value of a loan, so let's look at that. Future, sorry, I can't spell. Future value of any amount that you've either loaned, borrowed, or invested is going to be the principal amount. It's going to be the principal amount plus the interest. right? Future value is always signified by the letter A, right? So A equals the principal amount times the interest, right? And then there's another way to represent this. Remember, principal is P, but interest is also PRT, right? So with that being said, the actual amount, that's the way I look at the A. Actual amount of the future value of the loan will be A equals P plus PRT, or P times the quantity 1 plus RT. 1 coming from the fact you divided the P out, right? So this is the formula that you can use to calculate how much the total loan will be, right? Now remember, in our first, well, this is our second example, right? We calculate when we made a deposit, or when we were given this loan value of $1,800 after 2 years at an 8% interest rate, the total value was $288, right? Now, to figure out the total value, or the total amount that I'm going to pay after 2 years, you would just basically calculate this interest plus 1,800, right? So keep that in mind, and then we're going to look at putting the same information into this formula over here. All right. So let's look at it. Let's look at it. Let's do the math. All right. So that was 288 plus 1,800, right? So yeah, let's do this math first. 288 plus 1,800 is going to be 8888. 8 into a 0, carry the 1. So it's $2,088, right? Now let's look at it by putting it in this formula, right? Let's do it. All right. So again, principal 1,800 plus 1 plus RT. I think it was like 8% over 2 years, right? So that's gonna give you that 1,800. Hold on, that's times. I'm sorry. Did I say plus? Yeah, it's times, right? Yeah, 1,800 times this, right? 1,800 times 0.08 times 2 gives you 288 again. All right. So check that out. Then once you add it, you get this 2,088. So look, the math is the same, right? It's the exact same thing. So it's the interest plus the principal. So another way to figure out the future value or the actual value is just to take the interest and add it into the principal. You don't even have to put it into this equation or this formula here, but you can if you want to. And I was just showing you that. Okay. Let's look at one more example. And we're going to calculate. So we're going to calculate the interest amount, and we're going to calculate the actual amount, the actual value of the whole loan. The whole loan, because that's what it's gonna be. All right. So look, we're gonna look at the future value and the whole value. All right. So I'm gonna keep all of this up here so you remember. All right. So check this out. This situation, I'm taking on a $50,000 loan. $50,000 loan. Right. And an interest rate of 4% for 6 months. 6 months. Right. So first things first, you want to identify what you have here. 50,000 is P, 4 is R, and 6 months is time. The next thing you want to do is you want to remember, because this situation is less than years, you want to remember this amount of time as a year, or in relation to a year. So 6 months over 12 months, because it's 12 months in a year, gives you 1/2. So this is a half a year. A half a year is your time. All right. So the first thing you want to do is let's calculate what the interest is going to be. All right. So it's going to be 50,000 times 0.04 times 1/2, 0.5. Is it safe to change 1/2 to 0.5? All right. So that's what we're doing, right? So it'll be 50,000 times this times that. All right. When you do the math, you end up with $1,000. So over 6 months at a 4% rate, this loan for $50,000 gave back or required an $1,000 interest rate, or $1,000 interest, right? So now that is I, this is P. So the actual value of this loan then after 6 months is going to be 50,000 plus 1,000. This gives you drum roll, $51,000, right? So this is all simple interest is about, right? You get your principal, you get your interest rate, and the amount of time, and do the math. Get your principal, get your interest rate over time, do the math. Get your principal and your interest rate over time, and do the math. That is simple interest, right? If I could rap, I would make a song about it, but that's it. If you have any questions about this, feel free to comment below. And if you like this video, go ahead and hit that like button and subscribe. Mr. Do the Math out.